My talk for this morning is Protection, the Higher Self, and You. That means we're going to be talking about Tarot Key number 7, the Chariot, which you see before you. Now, when we speak about Tarot Key number 7, the Chariot, whether this is recognized objectively or not, whether your eye recognizes it or not, we are actually speaking about the previous 7 tarot keys, all at the same time. And I'll show it to you in a special way, because only thus will we be able to see how composite symbols can be brought together into one thing. Let's take a look at the way the previous tarot keys are shown in this one tarot key, and then we'll explain why. Now, tarot key 0, the Fool, if you remember, amongst other things, is super consciousness, alludes to that. Well, this figure, the charioteer, has a wreath on his head. The wreath is underneath the crown. It is right on the inside of it, so that he wears a wreath. So there's the wreath. Instantly ties him up with Tarot Key 0, the Fool, who wears a wreath on his head. There are other things, but I want to bring out one or two of the main ones. When we go to Tarot Key number 1, I wonder, well, where does Tarot Key number 1 tie up with this particular Tarot Key? It ties up in more than one way. The Hebrew letter for Tarot Key number 1, the Magician, Beth, means house. Now, the consciousness Kabbalah gives to this Hebrew letter is the intelligence of the house of influence. So here we have house also, but we have lots of houses. In the background you have all those different towers. Those are houses. And remember, house has to do with enclosure. In the Magician, the idea of house is shown by the rose arbor, so that it's more of an open type of house, in a sense. Although the dweller in the house is very concentrated. That's attention, remember, that the Magician portrays. Here we see all sorts of houses worked out from the original house of nature, in a way, or the original attention of consciousness has managed to bring about the development or the evolution of an extraordinary number of houses. And so the Hebrew letter here also means fence, which is a type of enclosure, again, having similar ideas to the that which we call house. And remember, the body is also called a house. It's the house of consciousness. And the personality is called a house. It is the house of consciousness in a more complex manner. So that house is shown. Then this vehicle that the charioteer is in, it's a house. It's a vehicle, is a house. It's a moving house, you might say, because that's what a chariot would be. So you can see there are many indications that relate to the fact that this is also an expression of the Magician. Now, Tarot Key number 2, where would you see the High Priestess there? Indeed, where wouldn't you see it? First of all, when you look closely at this tarot key, you should be seeing 2 moons, one on each side there somewhere. One on the right-hand side, the moon ought to have one expression. Is it there somewhere? Yeah. Yeah. And then on the other moon, you have another expression showing the pairs of opposites, also the waxing and waning of the moon. And remember, the High Priestess is assigned to that inner holy planet, which our Eastern brethren call chakras. It's assigned to the moon center, which is which in our physical body is associated with the pituitary body. So here we actually even have the moon showing. And when we consider the High Priestess is the principle of the moon and the principle of memory, we can see how, without any question, the High Priestess and all the meanings of the High Priestess are being represented here. And besides that, this tarot key is assigned to Cancer, astrologically, of which the moon is the ruler. So even here we have the indication. Now then, where do you see tarot key number 3? The Empress. We see tarot key number 3, the Empress, all over the place, because we see all the developments that come from the pristine waters of consciousness of the High Priestess. Remember, the Empress is creative imagination. The Empress is also assigned to love, which is used as a shield, and you'll notice that the brass, which is also associated with copper, is indicated in the shield that the Empress has before her, and here we also have a shield. One may be copper and the other brass, but they're completely interrelated. I think even atomically they're known to have a structure that is extraordinarily similar. But the point is, it's a shield. Here we have a metal shield being worn on the body with the Empress. We have it being held. But we have the indication of the expression or the final manifestations. For instance, the Empress also has meanings that have to do with garden or the growing. You see the wheat, the ripe wheat. In this tarot key, we also see fields, and these are the fields in which the Empress's wheat has been growing, incidentally. So we have it tied up there, and in many other ways. Now then, tarot key 4, where would we see that? There we look at tarot key number 4, the Emperor, and it doesn't seem to be tied in, not really, and yet it is in more ways than one. An emperor is a king, and a king wears a crown, and we have here this inner higher self, the charioteer, wearing a crown. That's just one of the many indications that are involved here. Holding of the scepter is very basically involved here. The development of the waters that the emperor is looking over and ruling, these are the waters of consciousness, are also here in the background as a protection. You know how in medieval times they'd build a mall, they'd have waters to help protect them from being attacked, so that even there we have some kind of interaction and a showing of waters as being involved with the use of the waters of consciousness to learn how to protect. And incidentally, the idea of protection is very strongly expressed in tarot key number 7. Remember, that's part of the title of our talk for this morning. Now then, tarot key number 5, how is that shown in the key? Well, if you will recall, the Hierophant isn't someone other than the Emperor, really. The Hierophant is the next development. The Emperor stands for the capacity to reason properly, the reasoning ability of consciousness, in order to put things in order. And then the Hierophant develops it further into the ability and capacity to receive intuitional guidance, the intuitional teacher. Now, it's the inner self who is the Hierophant. It is the inner self, which is the higher self. So they are basically the same figures, but each time they're shown expressing another portion of the nature. And here we have that part of personality in the Hierophant, which is shown by the 2 kneeling figures. That part of personality kneeling before intuition, or the revealer of the mysteries. In other words, we have our desires, our emotions, and our intellect kneeling, stilled, so that the teacher can speak and guide. In the same way, here, we're being shown the same idea by having the higher self do the real guiding, the higher self doing the complete guiding, and the reins that are being held, incidentally, have to do with the senses. You don't see the reins, do you? And this is another indication of the fact that we have to make our senses quiet, just like the quietness of the development from the senses in the Hierophant. before we can have the full awakening that we receive in and through this tarot key. Now then, the whole intuitional faculty is very much shown by the fact that the higher self is the driver of this chariot, guiding. In other words, it's that inner knowing that's doing the real guiding. The tarot key number 6, the Lovers, is shown very, very specifically here, because first of all, we see the union of lovers in the interaction of the little symbol that's in front of the chariot. And the lovers in themselves are an expression of union. Then there's the idea of discrimination. We discriminate by being able to see the difference between one thing and another. And so you have your 2 moons in showing the pillar of mercy on the tree of life that's as you face it the right-hand side, and your pillar of severity, which you see facing you at the left-hand side. You see them represented in one way in this tarot key, whereas you see them represented in the other way, or another way, in the Lovers. And then, too, the meaning of the Hebrew letter in the Lovers, Zion, which means sword, or to cut apart. We have here someone who has become, you might say, a ruler, or who is a ruler, who knows how to completely utilize or cut apart the false from the true. That is what you call the complete true discrimination. I want you to notice that even the sphinxes here are showing this pair of opposites, which the Lovers show by being shown Adam and Eve. Here we have like the white and the black, light and dark. All pairs of opposites are here shown. And notice that here the pair of opposites, which incidentally the sphinxes, they're known to present us with riddles. And what is the great riddle? What is the great question that's asked? The riddle of livingness. Why am I? What am I? What is the riddle of life, of beingness? Here, we're being shown that, along with the fact that the sphinxes, which could also mean horses, some renditions of tarot show them as horses, that these have to be quieted. Again, our senses have to be quieted and put under the control of the charioteer. The reins that you don't see, also incidentally, are a symbol for the mind. Now, not the intellect, the mind. And the mind belongs to the charioteer. All right, so I'm just showing, just very briefly, how all the previous tarot keys are being shown here. But basically, we have, within this tarot key, a symbolic representation to your consciousness, to your mind, of that which is your destiny to become, but also the fact that you have to go to work on attaining this destined rulership of being in charge of your chariot, of truly ruling it, but you're also being told that the higher and inner self is in charge of your chariot. Now, this key is also saying to you symbolically, and remember, that's the true language of your subconsciousness, the symbolic representation, so that you are being given spiritual training in more ways than one by having the correct images presented to you for subconsciousness to register them, so that your various other deductive processes can go to work and help you to change your erroneous thinking, feeling, interpreting, being, doing, etc. Now then, the intelligence of the house of influence, shown here. Here we have apparently a stillness, and yet we have the idea of a flowing because of the idea of influence. This is shown by the starry canopy on the chariot. It is saying, in essence, that the entire heavens are continuously flowing in and through us. Because basically we're being shown that this body, this tarot key, through its symbolism, is telling you your body is a receiving station or a manifestation of that energy, the same energy, which is part of the starry heavens. And the truth of the matter is you are made up out of stardust. You say, what makes me so solid then? That's one of the secrets this tarot key is telling us. We're not that all solid. Which sounds like it could be an insult at that, Somebody can be a solid citizen, and that's supposed to be good. Well, it is if we know what the word means. So we have another meaning, which perhaps is one of the most important ones, if it were possible for one meaning to be more important than another. The function attributed to this tarot key is the function of speech. Just think, the function of speech. And what does that mean, basically? Well, very much more than one thing. By giving the function of speech to this particular tarot key, which is also showing us the houses of influence in and through which we live, saying to us in essence that which you've put your attention to, the magician, that which you've held in your mind and as memory, held in as memory patterns, that which you weaved in your picturing, like your fears or your hopes or your despairs or your false interpretations, the Empress, powers of the Empress, the way in which you've been reasoning, the experiences of your life, the past, present, the future, your whole reasoning faculty as such in relation to your own life, most specifically, and in relation to life itself. The way you've been using your discrimination of this glorious lover level, the amount of intuition you've been able to receive, the amount of humility you've been able to have in terms of key 5 in its kneelings, the degree or lack of degree of the discrimination, depending on how positively you've been using the lovers, all of these have come together to give you the house you live in, which means not only that which you call your physical body, because you see, we're being shown here we have many more than one house. Even Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many mansions." And we live in many mansions all at the same time. Our physical body is one of the houses we live in and through. But then we have our soul bodies, which are also houses in and through which we live. Together they make up something we call a personality, which is another aspect of a house in and through which we live. Then you see how you have an enlarged field that goes on. The very field or the environment we're in. The field where this chariot is in. This is our environment, part of our environment. This is part of what we've been doing with all of our forces, our powers of consciousness, which we've just been mentioning. And even the city that we live in. You might say, when we see the city in the background with its walls, and what is that? It's the world we live in, basically. The kind of world we see. Even that we have built. So that basically we're being told that our entire environment, as well as our personal lives, all are the interaction, the expression of the forces of consciousness as we have used them to whatever degree they have developed or have not been developed. Our problems as well as our rejoicings. But then, what would speech have to do with all that, you might ask? In the Book of Tokens, there's one place, one of the meditations, I think it might be on the Emperor, says, "In truth, I utter myself by seeing." Isn't that an interesting? You might put it the other way and it'd be just as correct. I see myself in terms of my utterings. But the point is, how often have we used our power of speech to utter negativenesses about ourselves and others and our environment? And indeed, what we do with our speech is usually the end indication of what's been going on in all the other inner areas of our consciousness. I'm trying to show you a principle that gives control of the environment, that gives control of all of our fields of influence. And if we learn to watch our powers of speech, my beloved ones, it is amazing how much easier it becomes to transmute the images that we are making. This is true rulership. This is truly bringing about the development within our field of influence, that which we wish. This is what you call ruling, wherever the fences are in our particular lives. And we have to, as long as we're going to manifest in and through a vehicle and a personality, these are the fences. And remember, our vehicles are therefore the specializations, the way this divine all light, the energy of the stars of the heavens themselves come and shape and express through these shapes. The shapes are the shapes of our consciousness. We experience them then in the manifest, our field of the manifest, the larger, as you see in the city, as well as the lesser, as well as the smallest, which we may call our very physical body, although that's not so small. All of it is vast and it's large. What we need to do then is to understand that with this tarot key number 7, the Chariot, if we work at understanding ever more fully the whole meaning behind it, we will be able to better recognize the importance of and develop the ability to control our use of the power of speech, which has to do with our use of imagery, our rulership. This is your inner self being imaged to you, your inner self. You are being shown, as you look at this key, your subconsciousness is being given the suggestion continuously that the true higher self, the true inner self, is in charge of your body, in charge of your environment, in charge of your life, in charge of all things, in charge of your speech, in charge of your creativity, in charge of everything. And as you transfer this, as you watch, as you look, and remind yourself, this transfers itself into deeper and deeper aspects of your inner being, so that the manifestation becomes more and more of that perfected manifestation. That's how we finally arrive at the point where we bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. This is the work of the true spiritual aspirant. We misinterpret life. But when we permit the higher self, not that we can really stop it, I think maybe we can delay it. When we permit this true inner self, the true higher self, to be the driver of this chariot, that doesn't mean that we give up the having what we call these fences, because having the fences is the miracle of life. The miracle. Could you see a blue sky if we didn't have dust in the atmosphere and senses that limit our view of the vibrations of infinitude? Our ability to have our hearts lift to the sight of a mountain against the sky is because of the gift of the limitation of the senses, the consciousness being able to use the vehicle of senses, the chariot of the senses, for these extraordinary, fantastic wonders. We live in wonder of wonderland. The inner self experiences via the things we call limitations, but they're not, they're protections. and they protect that individualization, the consciousness. They help it to start seeing, feeling, experiencing, to become king, to become ruler, to really have the stars as our canopy. When we walk into our physical house, we know we're walking into heaven's own gates of glory, just as well as when we walk out on a path or on a mountaintop, because there is naught else. The pourings of the energies of the stars are everywhere, because the infinite vibrations are a through and throughness, and we're a very specialization of it. So then with the power of the chant, you see, we keep aligning and realigning ourselves to the divine powers, chanting these words of power, helping ourselves thereby to break up these and to shatter the patterns that have been keeping us miserable. God doesn't intend for us to be miserable. Our higher self doesn't intend for us to be miserable. We are grown by the Lord of the universe in order for the Lord of the universe to experience the richness, the fullness, and the completeness of victory. And victory, therefore, is another word assigned to this tarot key. Therefore, watch your speech, very much more carefully. Don't say to another person, you don't love me. Because even if they did, you're going to be training them not to with your images and words. You force them not to. If you hear the way I joke, you'll see one of the better ways to do it, and then that way you also help God chuckle through you. Don't say, I hate my work, I hate my profession, because you will be feeding yourself into a continuous field of experience that you will have to keep hating. You have to see everything as the gift, and which it is. It is. Everything we call limitation is the gift of the Most High. When we see it as this, we know then that we're under guidance, and we permit more and more, and we become more and more aware that it is the higher self living in and through this vehicle, and the vehicle, all of the vehicles of our lives. My darlings, you are being guided by the innermost, highermost self. And the love that that higher self, the divine, feels for you is infinite in scope. Relax and enjoy it.